Welcome to the Subjective Professor podcast, where we reject coercion and hypocrisy. This is episode 256, and we're going to talk about the fall of MSNBC. Well, first, I just want to apologize. Yesterday, I didn't do an episode, and that's because uh, I got sick, right? And it's still struggling with what I think is a sinus infection. On top of that, we're having parent-teacher conferences now. And yeah, they're kind of stressful. And I didn't have to do that kind of stuff teaching in college, and now it's not so bad because especially because the parents are it's a religious school, it's a Christian school, so there is a certain level of decorum. So I guess I have it a lot better than other people. Nevertheless, it is a bit stressful trying to talk about students to their parents. Anyway, so there are jokes on X about Musk buying MSNBC. And according to Gutfeld, MSNBC means must sell network by Christmas. Uh, and if you look and start to do research, a lot of these so-called news networks are hemorrhaging viewers and therefore money. And I'm surprised. Like, I grew up in the time, in the days when there were only three major news networks, ABC, CBS, and NBC. And you pretty much just watch those to get your news, and you knew what was going on in the world. And now there are so many other news networks. Like I guess I never really realized that CNN or cable news network was something like a different animal kind of thing. Like I knew it was 24-hour news, but I didn't realize that it was trying to take advantage of this cable network system. And that's what MSNBC, CNBC, all of these other networks, that's what that was about, that they were disseminating their information through cable or the internet, or no, not the internet. What am I saying? Like cable. Okay. And now there's a new competition to that format, which is streaming. Also, independent journalists that are creating platforms or you taking advantage of the ability to establish a platform on Rumble or YouTube or even on X itself. All right, so here's some of the details, some of the highlights or lowlights. So I'm getting this information from the New York Post and from Yahoo News. So yeah, there's a lot of sort of a range with these numbers, and so you kind of have to take them any number as a kind of ballpark. Um, anyway, on November 19th, Comcast, which is a cable news network, announces that they're going to spin off NBC Universal Cable Television Networks, and that includes MSNBC, CNBC, and other entertainment channels, um, because streaming sites are cutting into their viewership and also their profit margin. So Comcast is retaining NBC Universal's NBC Broadcast Television Network. I would assume that's a non-cable thing. So, right, the regular news stations that a sort of carryover when I was a kid, film, TV, and theme parks. So, Morning Joe, Joe Scarborough, who has a show called Morning Joe, they're part of that spin-off deal. And the reason is because MSNBC is averaging 550,000 viewers, I guess, per day, daily viewers, which is down 39% um, from what it was prior to the election. So October numbers versus November numbers, 39% drop and a 53% drop in prime time viewership. And so if you look at where people are watching, who are people are watching between, I guess, 5 o'clock and 10 o'clock, I guess that's prime time, or 6 o'clock and 11 o'clock. They have lost 53% of their viewers. CNN is down to 413,000 viewers per day, which is a 22% drop since October. In contrast to this, Fox grew 38% with a primetime increase of 21%. So it'd be difficult to say that suddenly all these MSNBC viewers are now watching Fox. I don't think that that is what's happening. APnews.com article, What Will Happen to CNBC and MSNBC when they no longer have a corporate connection to NBC News, which tells me there's a big deal there, probably in some sort of funding or oversight or some kind of liability protection. So, quoting from the article, it says, "It's a nervous time at MSNBC for other reasons. The network has seen a dramatic drop in viewership since Donald Trump's election victory. Although it is common that news networks that appeal primarily to one side of a political divide lose viewers when their candidates are defeated, history shows most viewers return, and MSNBC executives anticipate that." And I read that, and this is very strange, especially since these are supposedly news networks, but now it's sort of commonly, openly known, admitted that no, they're not news because they are simply spouting off one side's perspective, one side's subjectivity. And so they're not news, if you know what I mean. So news is supposed to be, at least when I was growing up, they tried to be as unbiased as possible. And now it's just sort of an open admission or openly acknowledged reality that certain stations have bias, large bias. Uh, and there it is out in the open, and no one really seems to think that this is a serious problem or that there's even something, that there's nothing to talk about here. It's very interesting, especially not that long ago when you were trying to talk about bias, they would just simply say, no, you just don't like the information that's, being provided through that outlet. And so this is just kind of mind-boggling to me anyway. And then also, why would the election of someone you don't support, why would that affect viewership? Assuming that you are not changing your political stripes, then why would you stop watching the source of the news? And that's the way it sort of kind of seems to be presented. And it doesn't make any sense to me. Maybe it makes sense to you. I don't know. It doesn't make sense to me. In the same way that I think it's safe to assume that no one has been converted. You don't see MSNBC viewers all of a sudden, watching Fox. I don't think that's what happens. I don't think you see Fox viewers all of a sudden watching MSNBC. I don't think that's what it is. I think you have a lot of people just checking out and just saying, I can't watch this. This is too upsetting. Or someone saying, "Oh, what's going on? This guy won." So, what were they saying about him that persuaded so many people to vote for him? So I think that was something interesting that I think will unfold moving forward. Do the numbers bounce back? What does happen? So this whole implosion of left-leaning so-called news outlets and their affiliated entertainment stations, because you got to realize that if they're left-leaning, then their entertainment services also are going to lean left. They're going to be more of the woke agenda. They're going to be advocating for LGBTQ type casting, plot lines, and things of that nature. And so it seems like the viewerships are down, yet they seem to maintain that they're making profits, continuing to make profits. And so I think that's kind of interesting as well. Perhaps they're not increasing their profits, but their profits are in decline. And I know that when it comes to the stock market and valuations of companies, that is a big deal. Like you could still be making a profit, but if it's less profit, even by just a little bit than last year, then it heavily impacts your stock price and trading in the stock market. So what I think is also kind of interesting is how a lot of people who are in charge of these networks are kind of clueless, or I mean, I'm sure they kind of know what is going on, but they're not publicly stating the actual reasons as to why so many people are turning them off. I don't think that it is necessarily all of a sudden people are realizing that they've been lying, that they've been giving us a lot of bad information. I don't think that that is, well, for the drop in viewership. I think that a lot of people who started turning away prior to the actual election did so because of the propaganda. Why the sudden drop after the election? Someone's going to have to give me a better reason than the opposition party was elected. That seems kind of lame. Almost, it doesn't really explain anything. That's what I'm trying to say. But the decline in viewership over the years, well, that's pretty obvious, right? They're not reporting the news any longer. And the information I quoted to you earlier in this episode bears that out, supports that thesis that they're not doing their job any longer. They're not presenting multiple perspectives, multiple possible interpretations, and leaving it for the viewer to, decide or come to a conclusion. They're basically spoon feeding everyone what they're supposed to believe is true. It reminds me of the College of Liberal Arts. So the humanities of a university where you learn stuff like religion, English, history, those departments of the university. Um, my former dissertation chair became assistant dean. And so, I saw the writing on the wall years ago, and with the decline, when enrollment started declining and people started fretting over how they were going to get more majors. Personally, and I taught at a religion department, and in the beginning, you know, 18 years ago, I tried to recruit a lot of religion majors. I tried to sell the department to try in an effort to increase the number of people who are going to take, you know, religion classes, become a religion major. I knew it was going to be a tough sell to be a major, so I sold them, advertised becoming a minor. And a lot of people became minors because they realized that they could just take only the classes that I taught, and they would just have to take one or two more, and they would have a minor. And so I joked around and said, "Oh, they're minoring in me," which was funny for a while. But anyway, I stopped doing that because everyone that I got recruited to become either a major or a minor turned into Marxists, right? That although I was pumping the free market, these beautiful ideas of freedom, my colleagues were all about, turning them into little fascists. So I stopped completely. I stopped recruiting, and no one really appreciated all the work that I was doing anyway. So I was like, why bother? And so I stopped doing it. But in my head, it was obvious why the CLA was failing. It was because they weren't teaching any longer. They were indoctrinating. And perhaps a lot of students didn't have the language for it. They understood what was going on. And the only way that the College of Liberal Arts could survive is by requiring so many of the classes that they would teach, uh, requiring every student in your university to take those classes. And by making that the requirement, it created this sort of professor bubble where they had to hire many, many more professors to be able to teach these required classes. Well, of course, the bubble pops, right? And that pattern of, pumping out an ideology which clearly people are rejecting, is something that a lot of people are very slow to take up. And so even my former university and the department has been rolled into other departments. So anything that they thought they were doing to save the program and the department and even the College of Liberal Arts is failing, failing miserably. But at the same time, you don't see anyone regretting or even thinking that perhaps the ideology or the indoctrination that they're doing is wrong. Rather, they double down, right? It's like we are so smart that we are always right. And that, of course, leads to their own demise. So the news networks consistently wrong and partisan, um, and so that kind of would explain why fewer and fewer people are watching. Um, But with the sudden drop after the election, you don't really see a lot of people realizing that they were wrong. I mean, the Morning Joe, that was hilarious, right? Where they called him Hitler and Nazi, and all of a sudden they're down in Mar-a-Lago trying to have a meeting with Trump. So aside from that, I haven't really seen, like, it would be kind of interesting to see the View all of a sudden, trying to kiss the feet of Donald Trump, but I don't think that'll happen. Most people, I think, double down in their ideology, right? There is very little repentance on the people on the left. Rather, it's just sort of more anger at the people who just don't see the truth as they see it. In contrast to the decline there, you see on X, Joe Rogan, the rise of, since Elon Musk purchased X or Twitter and then turned it into X, and then the rise of Joe Rogan and his podcast. I don't, that you see that there's a big shift, right, in how people get information, learn about the world. I don't know what the hard numbers are. Still being a little under the weather right after I record this, I'm just going to load up on cold medicine and then just crash. But I know personally that I get more news faster on X. Like whatever is happening right now, I find out first on X. And then you do a simple search, and then you can get some of the latest articles or what people are saying about the latest thing, which I think is just fascinating. It's much, much faster. I mean, I think I said it when Trump got shot at Butler, PA, that every minute you hit refresh and there was new information about what was going on in Butler. You had people on the ground uploading their own videos. It was happening at a phenomenal rate. And still, you go to the network news sites and they're still running headlines that Donald Trump tripped on stage or something like that. And so it took them hours to even update the headlines when anyone who was on X, were long past he stumbled on stage. And the great thing about X and other long form podcasts is that they are longer. There's no soundbite, right? There's people carefully crafting the perfect soundbite that can be uploaded and broadcast, rebroadcast on many different news networks and platforms. And because it is so long, people get to explain, which is why I think Donald Trump should be taking advantage of it and having long form speeches or presentations of explanation as to why he's doing what he's doing. People will tune in and all of a sudden start thinking about different things. This is why I would hope for a much more educated, much more economically knowledgeable leader, because then they can explain to everyone why things must happen in the way they have to happen, right? Why the debt has to be unraveled and how there's going to be a lot of pain. But the people who are going to suffer the most are the uber rich, which are the very people that everyone supposedly hates. And so in a few months, then everyone will be able to reap the benefits of not having these billionaires controlling their lives. So in the meantime, everyone should probably cooperate, start sharing again, start being nice to your neighbors, right? Be the kind of person that other people want to help instead of being the person that everyone never wants to see or hides whenever they see you. So, by having a much longer format, allowing people to see the personalities, you let the people decide what information they like better. And remember, better ideas always rise to the top. Bad ideas must be forced upon people. And these networks, right, they were dogmatic, right? Dogmatic to the point of hypocrisy, right? So you'll say, oh, let's say, for example, Israel is perfect, right? They don't do anything wrong. It's Hamas who's doing everything wrong. Well, you maintain that. You are forced to ignore many atrocities. You are forced to ignore the humanity of the other side. And that kind of hypocrisy is just easily blown up. Once you begin to see it, it becomes a pattern that you can see happening over and over and over again. And for that reason, more and more people stop watching that kind of information source, if it is information at all. In other words, their fact, quote unquote, fact becomes more important than reality, right? This vision, this subjective view of things, which they call facts, becomes more important than the lived reality. I mean, they're sitting there saying how the economy is doing so well while everyone is struggling to pay their grocery bill. It's just too much. And there is just too much diversity in society to remain convincing, right? I even joke around with my family that I think some of the people who came here illegally, voted for Trump, right? Because they're just too crazy. Like the whatever Harris and her ilk, everyone who was pushing her forward, it was just too much even for them, right? Because they're not all of the illegals are insane criminals. A lot of them are taking advantage of the opportunity to try to improve their life. I think the joke's on them because this society is about to collapse economically. When I say about to, it could be several years to like a slow collapse, but it's not what it was 30, 40 years ago as a society. So all those people leaving MSNBC, is it the point where propaganda has been revealed? In other words, the information bubble has popped or the fake news bubble has popped, right? And so now we have the rise of podcasts and independent journalists who used to be employed by those networks, right? Like Tucker Carlson, Megyn Kelly, even Matthew Taibbi, who was used to do Rolling Stone. Right, these people now have a far larger audience because they are much more fair, or Glenn Greenwald too, right? So they're much more fair in their presentation, right? They'll call a spade a spade. And so if one day they're saying, oh yeah, this was a good thing done by this person, and then the next day they do something bad, well, they'll call them out on it. Instead of saying, well, this person will always be good, so when they do something bad, we'll cover for them. That kind of reporting, I think, is yesterday. No one cares about that any longer. They want that integrity, which is largely absent these days. And so, also, a lot of people want to criticize people like Joe Rogan, like, oh, he's not a journalist. But no, but he's basically kind of like a talk show host in the way that old school 1970s Merv Griffin or Phil Donahue, they would have certain people on the show and they would go in depth and try to talk about a lot of different ideas, controversial ideas, even for people to learn, right? A long form sort of talk show thing. And so people like Joe Rogan, he's just a host, right? He invites experts on to talk about things, to share ideas, to present the ideas to the general public, and they can do whatever it is that they want with that information. Just not listen to the whole episode, listen to the whole episode, and then compare with other people. So he invited Kamala Harris as well as Donald Trump. And so to present both sides of this election and for people to decide for themselves. And he said as much. That's what he tried to do. But the not information gatekeepers, right? People like Clinton who wants to control the flow of information, decide what people are supposed to believe and, you know, uh, what they're supposed to hear, they get really upset because you're only supposed to hear one side. And that one side that you hear, it has to be in soundbite form. So this is a good thing. The decline of MSNBC, CNBC, all of these other CNN, it's a good thing. It's about time. But as with all good things, there's always the threat of being co-opted, of being taken over by other people. Like just like Occupy Wall Street was originally a libertarian thing and then was co-opted by all the Marxists and they turned it into something different. So also this podcasting industry may also be co-opted too. But as long as it remains diverse, I think it'll be very difficult for that to happen. And the reason is because people have a thirst for information. That's what I always had, right? And so I was very quick to say, okay, that source is no longer good, and I would move on. And most people, because they're the trusting conservative sort, they'll stay with their favorite news stations, and it might take a little bit longer for them to get jaded and move on, but eventually it does happen. And so just like we see that a lot of the printed news, what is it? I'm thinking of the movie Walter Mitty, The Life of Walter Mitty, or something like that, where Life magazine publishes its last, paper hard copy form, right? And it's because people aren't buying it any longer. So that is unstoppable. That desire to go to a more favored format is unstoppable. People cannot um, be stopped. And so this thirst for information can also not be held back. Free people are not satisfied with government propaganda, government misinformation. It's just too easy to see that it just doesn't line up. So for this moment, for these few days, maybe a few weeks, it's a good time right now. Much as I'm really frustrated with Donald Trump, some of his picks, some of the direction that he's moving, he has pulled back part of the curtain, right? Part of the curtain of the deep state, of all of this sort of simulation, as some people will say. And that's a great thing. So I am still hoping that he is as smart as he should be for being a CEO of a large company and that he's playing some really great, phenomenal 4D chess. That's what I'm hoping, hoping beyond hope that the people he surrounded himself with are that's what I would do, right? I would surround myself with people who understand how the D state works, make picks in such a way that it outs all of his true enemies so he knows who to be careful of, and then he inserts his actual picks. That would be something wonderful. I'm sure he would have thought of it, this subjective professor guy sitting in his chair after teaching middle school can't know this and he not, right? So I'm hoping that they know. And there it is. Okay, I'm going to try to do an episode tomorrow as well. Uh, 28, 29 minutes for this one to make up for the fact that I didn't do one yesterday. And yeah, I'll try to do something different for Thanksgiving as well. So I'll talk to you guys next time.